My name is Jerome Ferry and my cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with Ethel Furman, who was an early Cedar Rapidian and whose past husband worked for the Rock Island Railroad. Ethel, when and where and were you born?
I was born in Keswick, Iowa, in March the 3rd, 1906. I've always said they must cause quite a commotion because 6 weeks later they had the San Francisco earthquake.
What was your parents' names?
My father was John Shelby Jarvis, and my mother was Winnie Mae Moore.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have one sister.
One sister.
Yes.
What did your dad do? What was his occupation?
Well, at one time we moved to Oklahoma. We lived in western Oklahoma at Arnett, and I was 4 years old when we came back from there. And he had worked in his cousin's lumber yard down there. And then when we came back, he worked for a while in the oil fields. And then by that time, then we moved to Wellman, Iowa. And I was 4 years old.
Where is Keswick?
Keswick?
Mm-hmm.
In Keokuk County.
Near what, Washington, Iowa?
No, it's near Sigourney.
Sigourney,
Sigourney is the county seat there.
Was it a fairly good-sized town when you
Yes.
lived there?
My grandparents had lived at North English, and because they only had 8th grading schooling, so they wanted, they had 2 boys and a girl, and they wanted them to go on because my grandfather had been educated in Washington County in the country schools, and his, what do I want to say? Both his father died when he was 4 back in Indiana. His mother died when he was 12, and so he and his sister and baby brother were taken care of by 2 uncles. One lived at it's south of it's south of Marengo.
Millersburg.
Oh, Millersburg. Mm-hmm. One lived at Millersburg. He had a hotel, and the other one had a farm north of Wellman. Mm-hmm. My grandfather went to the country schools.
Yeah. And you grew up in Wellman?
Yes, I grew up in Wellman. And my grandfather, his... oh dear. His uncles and the lawyer that were his. What do I want to say, Ruth?
What that? The uncles?
And the lawyer. Anyway, they didn't think he'd get the proper education at an Iowa country school, and so they sent him when he was 16 or 17. They sent him to Earlham College in Indiana, and he went 2 years. And then in the Iowa history books, he was one of 5 school teachers that they had in the country schools in Iowa County. And he was...
I have a note here that your father was a airplane mechanic in World War I.
Yes, he was. Mm-hmm.
Did
he went and I is someplace. Oh, I think it's in my book, Ruth.
Was he in the military?
He went over with the Canadians, but he took his training down in Missouri, and then they went over in. He went over on my birthday, March the 3rd, in 1918. They was sent over, but it was called. Oh dear.
Expeditionary Force.
Oh, yes, American Expeditionary Forces, and he was an airplane mechanic. And I have the letter from the King of England to John Shelby Jarvis thanking him for his help because they saved him from the Germans.
Did your father ever fly a plane? Did he have a?
No, he never flew a plane, and he was 90. He was 90 when he died, and he said anybody was a fool to go up in a plane, but they used to take the parts and go out in the fields and repair the planes wherever they were.
But evidently he never had a desire to fly.
Oh no, but he was a mechanic. He was old, and he could just do anything with a car. He just loved the car.
Did you have the opportunity to go to high school, Ethel?
Yep, I went to high school.
In Wellman?
Yes, and I went a half a year to the old school before they built the new one. And now then they have another new one, and the old one is gone. That I went to is gone.
When you graduated from high school, did you have any idea what you wanted to do with your life, or
No,
people didn't plan ahead like that, like they do now?
No.
Or?
I only went 2 years to high school, and but I always liked school.
Did you get a job? Did you have after school? What was your first job?
Oh, I used to babysit a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was mine. And then I worked some in the telephone office, but then I worked for the Rock Island during the 30s when we were up at Mount Auburn, the other side of Vinton, and
What was your job at the Rock Island?
well, I was a custodian and the express agent.
The custodian kept the station clean, or did you have to clean cars?
We lived, no, but I lived upstairs, and I took care of the express, and it was during the 30s, and they every Monday I had to be there when the passenger train came in at 10:30, because the only way they could keep the bank open up there was the Merchants Bank here would send 2 bags of money up, and I had to be there to sign for it, and I'd take it inside, I'd lock the door, call the bank, and they'd come and receive their money for the week to run the bank. That's the only way they could keep the bank open.
How old were you at this time, do you suppose?
Well, I had 2 little girls. That was, we moved there in January of 33.
33. Were you bonded or anything?
Yes,
you
I
were
was.
bonded?
And I was the express agent.
That was a pretty responsible job.
That was the reason that in January 1920, I got my Social Security card, and because the man had come from Cedar Rapids to check the depot and go over the books and everything, he was. So he said, "Have you got your Social Security number?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well," he said, "we might just as well fill it out now." So he did. So in January in 1937, I got my Social Security card. And my husband was working over in Illinois, at Morris, Illinois at that time, in the depot, and he didn't get his till next November.
You were mentioning handling all that money for the banks. Do you recall any train robberies?
Oh, yes, the one in Mason City. What was the guy?
That wasn't John Dillinger? Or
Yes, it was.
Jesse Dreams.
He operated out of Minnesota for a while, Northfield, Minnesota.
Yeah, and my husband was working at Manly at that time when they had that. And yes, that was quite a thing, because we had to be very, very careful. And I had two little girls, and then finally 3 little girls, and I used to always take them downstairs with me. We lived upstairs, but we managed to get through the Depression that way.
What year did you get married, Ethel?
In 1922.
1922? And how old were you?
I wasn't 17 yet. And,
How many children did you end up having?
just 3 girls.
3 girls?
Ruth, would you get the picture? Yeah, I had 3.
And then
Of you 3.
your husband was working where when you got married?
He was on the extra board. He worked here in Cedar Rapids, and he worked clear. He was an extra depot agent and operator, and he would work from Burlington to Minneapolis, and they had was it 3 or 4 divisions besides, and it went clear to South Dakota, and then they would even furlough him over to Chicago and all around.
This is your family here, Ethel?
Yes,
3 girls?
My 3 girls,
What were their names?
Ruth, Jean, and Mary Lou.
Ruth is the one you're living with right now.
Yes, and Mary Lou lives here. She worked for St. Luke's. She was an operating room technician for over 26 years.
Really?
And my other daughter lives in San Diego, Jean.
Jean? Mm-hmm.
And her husband was in the Navy over 30 years. And so she's our traveling one.
And Ruth, you're living in her home now at the
Yes.
present time.
And after my husband died, Ruth and Dwayne lived in Barron, Wisconsin, and then a year and a half later, they moved back here, and they lived with me for about a year, and then they bought this house, and
You had mentioned the fact that when you first got married, your husband was working on the extra board on the railroad. Could you explain what that term meant, extra board?
yes, they on the extra board, they relieved anybody that wanted off from Minneapolis to Burlington and clear up to just the edge of South Dakota. So it was really something.
He had to fill in.
He filled in, yes.
And he never knew when he was going to be called.
No, he didn't.
He had a report from work when they called.
And yes, he was. And one thing, when he worked at home there, they games and all, the baseball games and all, they didn't get the report on them like they do now.
Yeah.
And it always would be the next day before the St. Louis Cardinals was his favorite. So every morning after the game, he would go down and he'd get however the game came out, who won, and so on. And he'd always print out a little thing for all the businessmen because they always made a trip down to the depot to find out, because we didn't have television or even much radio. There was just a couple of people that had radios, and so he would get the report at 7:30 in the morning, and then all of the businessmen would have to hurry down when they went to work so they could find out how the game was.
So he was a pretty popular guy for somebody interested in sports and wanting to know the final
and
score or something.
They were his team.
So when he had to report to fill in for these people, he probably rode the train to get there.
Oh yes, he always did. And he had worked for the railroad enough that we were married in August, and in December he got his first 5-year pass, and I did too. So all those years.
You have a copy of that pass there in front of you.
Yes.
Can you turn it around so Ellen can get a
yes, if you can.
close-up shot of it?
Yeah, I got it.
Now this pass would allow you what kind of privileges?
Other than that, we had to pay for our bedroom in the Pullman. Everything was paid. We just filled out a little sign, signed it, and we could even send in and get passes to go on the other railroads, but we had to pay for our own bedroom on the Pullman.
They paid for the food?
No, we paid for our own food.
But this would allow you to ride a Rock Island train any place the Rock Island went.
Yes, and when after he got retired, when he got this pass, it caused quite a little commotion. Even when we were down on the Golden State and all, here every time they'd stop it, here'd come somebody in. We'd like to see your I never saw a gold pass. I'd like to see your gold pass.
But when you were both working, you probably didn't get too much of a chance to use it, did you? Because he was working a lot of hours and you were working a lot of hours.
He only got this when he retired, the
Oh,
gold pass.
okay.
But we had a system pass, and
Did you take a ride? Take the girls for a train ride very often
Yes.
while your husband was working?
yes, we did. We would go back to Wellman, and then my mother lived in Sigourney later, and we would go down there. But you see, we just have to order a pass on any of they all honored.
Each other.
Yes. Yes, went to the East Coast, and we went about twice a year. We'd go to California after our daughter was out there, and yes, we went.
Very nice. When you were growing up in southern Iowa, did you get a chance to come up to Cedar Rapids?
Oh yes, very often.
Did you?
Because I had an uncle that lived on a farm up by Old Wine, and I had an uncle that lived down at West Liberty. And yes, and we'd always come up to Cedar Rapids.
Would you come up with your mother or?
Well, my mom used to always come with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I remember coming, I was 6. And we would come on the interurban from Iowa City. And when we had so far, we could go about a block and a half to Killian's, and then we could come up to the depot at the
Would that have been the Union Depot?
the Union Depot, and that was a beautiful thing. You know, it extended really. The depot itself, of course, they had part of a platform to the north there, to 3rd Avenue, but the depot itself extended clear over 4th Avenue, and then on down were the what do I want to call it? Where they had the baggage and everything, and inside, oh, it was so pretty. They had this big door, the one big door to the west that was right on 4th Avenue. It opened right on 4th Avenue. And then they had a waiting room for the women, and there was not the Red Cross, but the Salvation Army had a big desk here. And then there was, the men's was on the other side. And they had huge, great big fireplaces on each side. And then this was the office in here. And I don't know about the men's part, but for the women's part, they had a great big room there. And then there was their toilets and all. And then on was a big restaurant. And they were open 24 hours a day, and they had in the women's restroom, they had rocking chairs and baby beds, and it really was a beautiful place. As they always said, it was the prettiest depot between Chicago and Los Angeles.
How many trains do you suppose went through the Union Depot in a day's time then?
Well, let's see, there was 1, 2, and there must have been a 10 or 12 a day, passenger trains. And that was just the passenger trains. I have no idea how many, but that was the reason I had hoped I could find one of the train sheets for you, because they had every station and every the crew for each one of the trains and all, and they just used to slide that across this way and this way. And they kept the door locked. They were up on the 2nd floor was my husband, to where the dispatcher's office was. There was a dispatcher's office and the superintendent's office, and then they kept their door locked, you know, because when you have that much on your mind and all, you don't have time to visit.
Very similar to being the airline control.
Right.
The control tower.
Mm-hmm. And we lived over, when we moved here, then we lived over on 11th Street Northwest, right across from Harrison School. And my husband used to lay in bed at night, and he'd hear the trains down in the yard. It'd be quiet, you know. You could hear the trains across the river there. And he could tell the way they were handling the train. He could tell who the engineer was.
They had good ones and they had bad ones.
Yeah, they really did. And but he knew everybody's name that worked for the Rock Island, but he should with the train people, because he had to write their name. See, they had to have, on these big sheets, every train, they had to have every car, what was in it, or whether it was empty. And he'd have to write everybody's name that was on the crew. And by the time you'd write that so many times a day, you really got to know everybody.
You have a very nice photograph of him here on the job.
Yeah,
I'd like to
that's
have you.
what
I'd like to have you hold it up.
Oh,
Alan, can you get that? Now this was Hank.
yeah, Hank.
He was known as Hank, and he's working in his office, and that evidently is one of the big sheets of paper
Yes,
that he is working
they
on.
were
That you were
they
talking
were
about.
16 foot long, and they had the name and engine of every train, and they also had to have whether the box cars or coal cars, whatever they were, if they were empty, full, and then they had to figure how much tonnage each engineer was pulling, and how long. Sometimes he'd stay quite a little while after work because they'd figure out how long it would take each train with the tonnage they had and all to go from one station to the next. That was quite, and he'd always figure it, and then they'd have to wait and see, whether he really was right or not.
I notice he has a microphone on his chest. Now, could he communicate with stations up and down the line?
All the time. He was
All?
connected with it. All they had to do was push a button for each station.
Could he talk to Chicago or
To Chicago.
yeah,
He
directly to Chicago?
He could if they would
Transfer his call or
transfer his call through. Yes, he had a lot of the officials that were.
He was in constant communications with all the other dispatchers across the country.
And our very dear friend B.R. Dew was the he wasn't the general manager, what did they call at Des Moines.
Superintendent?
Yes, he was the superintendent of the Cedar Rapids Railroad, and I still correspond with his daughter-in-law. But they were quite a big family. Someplace when he retired, they had a big party at Des Moines at one of the hotels there for us. I think there was, and they came from down in Kansas City and Chicago, and
He was well known. I could imagine when you worked in that responsible of a
And
position like that.
there used to be a man here in Cedar Rapids, and he loved the railroad, and he would work he loved to work as a dispatcher, and he worked. And then when they had some trouble at the courthouse here, and he took over because he was an auditor, and he'd make out our income tax. He had an office here, and he had a couple of girls that worked in it, and Ray Coots was his name, and we all called him Bob. And then later he was the president of the Train Dispatchers Union, and he went overseas then for a couple of years and run for the government, an office over in Belgium.
Mhm.
And we used to love to have him come.
Yeah.
He'd call on the phone and he'd say, "Ethel, what's Hanky doing?" He said, "You tell him I'll be in Cedar Rapids tomorrow."
The Rock Island Railroad, who was Who founded that originally in Cedar Rapids?
Well, Judge Green, and there were several other men, and that's the reason I didn't find that, but I wanted that book so bad, because it tells when it was founded and all, and there used to be a tree with a emblem on it that was for the founding of the Rock Island Railway down in the Greens Park there. But then finally the tree got cut down, and there used to be this plaque used to be there.
Did you know they put a new memorial there last week in
No.
honor of Judge Green?
No, I didn't.
Yes, it's similar to a tombstone, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And they commemorated it, I think it was last week.
Yes, well, that was,
What was some of the other railroads in Cedar Rapids, the major railroads at that time? Was there a Milwaukee? Or?
the mill, well, see, I thought I had a picture of it.
The Milwaukee Depot, was that close to the Union Station?
That was on First Avenue, and right where the Rock Island had the headquarters for this division on First Avenue.
Would that be like
And
the Scopeman Building? What the Scopeman Building is?
The
now?
Scopeman Building was the Rock Island Depot, and that's where they had the headquarters for this division. And then the Milwaukee Depot was right beside that. And then there was a restaurant, or I mean a hotel, right in back that was the Rock Island used for all of their a lot of their employees.
With all of this train traffic passing through the center of the town, did the citizens back then, did they complain about the inconvenience?
Yes, and in the 40s, they even considering building a bridge on 3rd Avenue across the railroad tracks. There used to be a lot more tracks than there is now, and I don't know. I don't think people quite understand the railroad. As my husband used to tell me, the railroad owns the land, and they just give the highways permission to use them, but that is really the railroad property where the tracks run. Yeah, he used to always tell me that. He said that was it.
Would you hold these up, Ethel? There's a couple of old
And these are
passenger timetable schedules.
time, yes. They used to, but they used to come out every so often with a new one. Good reason for shipping in the Rock Island. But
Now, if you wanted to go to the West Coast, you could have went to the train station, and
no, he would just write to his superintendent and ask for a pass, or if he wanted one, he would write to the different railroads. And
no, what I meant was a regular citizen, if they wanted to go to a regular passenger, if they wanted to go to California, they would go to the Union Depot, tell the ticket agent where they wanted to go. They would probably have to switch between different lines, or did the Rock Island run right to California?
no, they didn't. But they had to, yes, they did. If you wanted to go the southern way and go on the Golden State,
Mm-hmm.
and we. But
Did you ever meet was there any prominent people that come through Cedar Rapids on the train? Was there any presidents that passed through after they had deceased or passed away, or?
yes, the first one was 1923. president, had been to Alaska, and he died in California, and when he came through, and
Would that have been Hoover?
no, it was one. It was in 1923. Let's see. It was the one that was after Roosevelt. He was just president for 1 year, and he had been to Alaska, and on his way back in California, he took sick, and they never knew exactly. They always were afraid someone might have murdered him.
Did the people in Cedar Rapids at that time, did they know that his body was going to be passing through Cedar Rapids?
Yes, someplace we have a picture of all of them down at the depot there when the train came through. And one time, what was his name? Our president. The one that's so sick now, Ruth.
Oh, right.
And,
Harding.
yes, Harding was the one. And they had pictures of all of the people that gathered down here when the train went through.
Was your husband working as dispatcher at this time?
He was working as a depot agent,
Mhm.
but not here. But he, of course, he was. We lived at Wellman for a number of years, and they'd send him to Minneapolis, all up and down there, and then when we lived in Mount Auburn, they even had him working in Chicago, and he worked. And then after we lived here a long time, when they closed the office down here, he worked 12 years in Rock Island, and he had from Chicago to Des Moines. That was his territory that he had, and then the last year he worked, they closed the dispatcher's office in Rock Island and sent them all to Des Moines. He worked till 4 o'clock the afternoon. They were to leave to go to Des Moines, and then he took the train to Des Moines and got there about midnight. And he had, in the meantime, they'd taken this huge, great big dispatcher. They had a big board, and they would punch in, and talk to each one of them. They had to take the side out of the second-story building of the depot in Des Moines to put the board in up there, but at 8 o'clock the next morning he went to work on the same board in Des Moines. And we had gone to, my son-in-law and I had gone to Des Moines and reserved a hotel room for Harold. It was just 2 blocks from the depot, and it was just 1 block to a good restaurant there. And we thought that, and for 1 year, he rode the planes from Cedar Rapids to Des Moines back and forth, and it got to be quite a joke. They'd say, "Now, how many more weeks is it? How many more weeks till you retire?" Who ever heard tell of a train dispatcher going back and forth to work
Commuting
at a
back
plane?
and forth on an airplane.
And yeah, it really got to be quite a thing.
When
But
your
he-
husband, in the later years, working for the railroad, was there any new technology as far as the electronic boards or?
Oh yes, they would change a lot, and
Did he ever mention having a hard time keeping up with the latest technology? And
No. I'll tell you how he learned to telegraph. He lived in South English, and his father was a section foreman, and his very good friend's father was the depot agent, and they lived almost a block apart on different streets, and so those boys run a line through the trees from one house to the other. They sent to Sears and bought a telegraph key, and of course Mr. Sephoric taught the boys, and they would talk back and forth from their homes. That was that was the way he learned to telegraph. And then he was, the summer before he was 15, he worked for his father on the section. And the summer before he was 18, he ran a section gang out of Muscatine, Iowa, and he had 40 men from Mexico. They would bring him up from Mexico to work for the summer, and he was laying rail, and he never had trouble but with one of them, and he had something my husband told him to do, and he swore at him, and he said to him, he had 40 Mexicans and 2 interpreters and a man that kept track of the trains. They had up over they put a copper wire up over the telegraph wires, and then he could telegraph and find out where all the trains were, so he'd have all their equipment and everything off of there. But that one guy, he said to him, I know what you said to me, and he said, you're done. And he wasn't 18 yet when he was doing that. And he said, I'm not taking you back 15 miles to Muscatine. He said, you can walk back. When you get to the depot, tell them to give him your time slip. He'll send you back to Mexico. And he never had any trouble with the rest of them.
did your husband ever mention, was there any serious snowstorms where
Oh, yes.
the trains got blocked or couldn't get through?
We've got a picture of that one when they were, and then when he was up in the northwest there, up at Esterville. Yes, that was that bad winter in '36.
Well, I imagine they lost communications with the telegraph lines went down too, did they not?
Oh, you should see. We have a picture someplace, and here somebody's standing way up high, and you know they'd have cuts that would be block full. Mm-hmm. We lived in the depot at Mount Auburn. I know, and he was up in Esterville working for that.
What about hobos? Did a lot of hobos?
Well, I locked the depot up every night, and in the wintertime, I can tell you how that would go. See, as soon as 6 o'clock, I'd lock the depot, and I had kept 4 fires, 2 upstairs and 2 down, all the time. And I know I carried the coal. And I carried 15 ton of coal that winter, I know.
Did you get paid for this?
Yes,
No, that was when you were a custodian?
yes.
Okay, so you were getting paid.
I got paid, and we had our home, we lived there, and they furnished our telephone, of course. We had a telephone, and we paid our own light bill.
Did you have a lot of vagrant people or hobos that would try to come in to get out of the cold? And
Nope.
stay warm in the station?
No, we never did.
You had mentioned earlier in talking that the Salvation Army had a desk in the Union Station. Why? Why would they have a desk at the Union Station?
That's where people went. They helped them, you know, people that come, and sometimes they anything you needed, they had somebody sitting there at the desk all the time. And if anybody needed help or anything,
Were a little short on money, or?
yes, I have an idea that they took care of it, and but they had a great big desk there, and there was always at least one person there.
Do you? The reason I'd ask about the hobos, didn't they have a police for or yard cops or yard policemen that policed the yards to keep vagrants off of the off of the trains?
Cars. Yeah, they did. And see, they had a big crew for the yard office down there too. Yeah, the railroads really. So they had the shops here, you know, and.
The Rock Island shops down behind Quaker Oats, that must have been quite a large facility at one time.
It was, yes.
Was there a round table down there?
Yes, there was. I remember one time one of the trains got off the round table, in the round table too, and they had have a big derrick coming.
When you come to Cedar Rapids as a young girl, did your mother ever take you to places like Killian's, maybe Killian's department store around Christmas time with the beautiful decorations?
Oh, yes.
In the windows?
Yes, they did. And that was, yes, we always liked to come to Cedar Rapids.
And Kresge's was probably a very popular place.
Oh, yes, it was. And they had an eating place there, you know, at Kresge's. And they used to have, they had someone that played the piano for, and where they had all their music for sale and all, and everything. We always liked to walk through there and listen. And when someone was playing,
You remember Armstrong's
yes.
department store?
And what was the other department store there? But it was.
Martin's,
They-
Kramer's.
They had two. They had one store on First Avenue, a smaller one, and then on Second Avenue. And you know, you cross the alley, you could go from one part
Kramer's.
to the other.
Kramer's.
Yes, and yes, it was something. And then of course, after we moved here first, you know, they still had the big old music hall across from the hotel.
The Opera House, you mean?
Yes, the Opera House.
You're not talking about Green's Opera? Really?
Yeah.
Did
It's
you ever
still-
go to there?
Yes, one time we went there. We had to. It was in the winter, and we were going to. We missed the train to go up to my uncle's, and so we had to stay all night, and we went to a show there.
You don't recall what the show was?
No, I don't. That was about it was about 1915 or 1916. And I know, but
Did you ever recall hearing about the Cherry Sisters?
oh yes, in my. They were always well advertised. And,
How about Bishop's Cafeteria? Did you ever?
oh yeah.
They go back a long ways too, don't
Yes,
they?
they did when they were downtown there. Yes, they sure did. We always did eat at Bishop's. and
Did they have a spring in the basement?
they had I was just going to say that, and you know, they had spring water, and they had a spring in the basement, and it was good water too. And of course,
Now the laws are such they wouldn't be able to serve spring water.
but you know, now on the trains, they on the dining cars, I know when we went east, they would have certain, in Virginia's there, they would have spring water was advertised right on their folders, and from certain springs is where that was the water that they furnished, and we done was.
Did you ever get the opportunity to go into Chicago on the railroad?
Yes,
Would that have been Grand Central Station you would have went into?
Yes.
Chicago?
we did. And I sure hated it when we had to transfer from one depot to the other, because we were going under the L's, and I didn't like them. We were walking, and they were going right over our head.
That was a grand place,
Yeah.
Grand Central Station.
Yes, it really was. It really was something. And,
Do you recall the flood of '29?
yes, as a matter of fact, I came up to visit, and I was spend a week here. My husband was down at doggone. Where is it that Laurie's kids go to school? Solon. He wasn't the agent, he was just the operator. He was the night operator down there at Solon. And so I wanted to come up and visit. And these friends of ours lived right over here. About four blocks from here. And I spent a week here. And the only bridge we could go across was the 16th Avenue Bridge. And I'll never forget, we just almost had heart failure as we came up along before we got to the... Well, it isn't the... Oh, and
You were trying to think of the Douglas Starch Works.
the starch works there. And you know that they've made it into a park now down below, but
Riverside.
it was just full of water. And here was a little guy on a scooter just going along there, and he got off of that scooter, and I said, "Oh, you'll have to stop." And he was over and looking down, and the water was just almost to his feet. And finally, here comes somebody running to grab him and all. And then over on Ellis Boulevard, they had canoes, and they would just go right up to the steps of the building, the stores there.
And you happened to be staying in Cedar Rapids at that time.
Yes, I stayed a whole week, and
You had a lot to
just
tell your friends back home.
just the it hadn't been open very long, and we went to the theater, and they had the songs, you know, they would play, and they'd show the music up on the screen, and everybody would sing with them. That was really something. That was in '29.
The interurban that run between Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, was that used a lot by passengers?
Oh, yes, it was. We used to go, and you know, there used to be students that went to Iowa City to college, used to go back and forth on that. We always liked it. And then someplace I have a picture of the little cookie house, you know, that St. Luke's has built over now, and that the interurban from Waterloo came down that far, and then I always thought if I ever was left a fortune, I'd sure try to bring the intervents back, because it'd be that you could go to Waterloo and Cedar Falls and come down here, and then get the other interurban and go to Iowa City. Yes, we used to use them a lot.
In our pre-interview, Ethel, I heard earlier this summer you were telling me a story about a Catholic dollar bill.
Yes, my daughter has it. I'm sorry, the one in San Diego. That's one thing she wanted of her dad's. Yes, we had this. Harold was up at Faribault, Minnesota. He was agent there. And as a matter of fact, we moved up there for a few months.
Faribault, Old Connor agent.
And they, this lady came in, an elderly lady came in and bought a ticket. She was going to California for the winter. And she paid for her ticket with $20 bills. And the ink on them was purple. And so he told her that he'd have her ticket made out and she could pick it up in the afternoon. And so, but she paid him and she went away, and he said to me, I got to lock up, I've got to go to the bank right away. And so he went to the bank and he said to the banker, I just sold a ticket. I know it was several $100s, and he said, she paid me a $20 bill. He said, are they real? He said, boy, I'll take all you got of them. He said, they're as real as they can be. And they were in purple ink. They were stamped. He said she must have had them down in her shoe since the Civil War.
Whose picture was on him, do you recall?
No, I don't remember. But anyway,
Why were they called a Catholic dollar bill then?
oh, well, up in the corner is the Virgin Mary, and then there's the flaming torches, and then on the back, all the way, and some landing of Christopher Columbus. And on the back is the rosary all the way around. And I was going up to where Harold was up there in Minnesota on the train, and in the Des Moines Register there was a piece about that they were calling in all of these bills, and I said to Harold, well, why would they do that? And he said, well, because something on them that wasn't what they were supposed to be. But, and so he went over, looked in the drawer, and he had one of these bills. And so I just give him the money for it, and he gave me the bill, and I'd kept it all these years. That was in the 20s.
What an interesting story.
Was it the same size as a present 20, or were they a little larger?
It wasn't a 20, it was a $2
A $2 bill. Oh, I thought you said a 20.
bill.
I'm sorry.
No, it was a $2 bill.
Oh,
And but anyhow, that was it. And Jean has it. She wanted that because she thought that would be something to save. So that was hers.
You both grew up during the Depression, Ethel. Did this have any effect on either one of you?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Ethel.
And the Depression, we were living in Clarksville. My husband had a regular job in the depot, and they cut some of the jobs, and so we moved back to Wellman, and our banks closed, and there was 11 months that my husband, then that was when we had moved to Mount Auburn, because I would have a job, and we could live in the depot, and then I was also the custodian and the express agent. And then, lo and behold, that was the summer that we had the drought.
35, 36.
And you couldn't even buy a job to even work for a farmer or anything, because they had the drought and they didn't have any crops. It was quite a bad time.
And I imagine there was very few people that could afford to ride the train during that time too.
Well, no, the trains still run, and we really knew it when now. But so, as my husband said, well, you couldn't even buy a job on a farm because the farmers didn't have any crop that year.
When did your husband Hank pass away, Ethel? Or let me back up. When did your husband retire? How old was he when he retired then?
He was 65.
Was it mandatory at that time? Did he have to retire?
You were supposed to retire. And then he was 65 the 21st of November in 65.
66.
Or 66, because he was born in 1901.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
And what year did he pass away in?
He passed away at 1990 on his birthday.
What age?
He was 89.
89.
Yeah. And he was...
You lived a very long...
And he was... In all that, the time that he was retired, what was it, about 22 years? He corresponded even with one of the old presidents of the railroads, and we used to go down 6 or 7 years. We went down to Arizona for the winter, and this president lived there at. We'd go to Mesa, Arizona, and he lived in Scottsdale, and so every Wednesday Harold had to go to lunch with him because he was, and they all called him Hanky, and they were just, you had your close friends, and you had some of them that you didn't care so much about, but they really were like a great big family, all the railroad people. And if somebody was moving or anything, why, you were expected to entertain them at your home till they got settled, and it really was nice.
And you, after, I think you said after he retired, you took advantage more of the past, the lifetime
Oh
past.
yes, but we always tried to go once or twice a year, and it really was lovely, I tell you, because we liked to go. When we go to California, we'd ride in the Vista Dome, and it really was something. And that was the first time we went from over here at Marion. Why, they had changed the Pullman cars, and he thought that we were just going to have a berth, so that when we got on the train, no, we couldn't have. They didn't have a berth; they had bedrooms, and so then he said, "Now, what would you like to do?" And Harold said, "Well, how much are the bedrooms?" And he said, I think it was $56. And I said, we'll take one. And he said, boy, you're sure spending money. And of course we always ate in the diner, and they always had lovely meals. Let me tell you, they sure put on nice meals. And they had a big club car, and you could sit there. You could go up in the Vista Dome. It was really nice.
Do you think, your personal opinion, after the World War II was over and everybody started driving automobiles, that was probably the end of the passenger trains? Or
No, I don't know. Yes, I expect it probably had a lot to do with it. But they still, we used to have passenger trains with the club cars and the sleepers and everything on them. We'd go to Iowa City and catch the ones, and we'd go to Denver, and then we'd go out and we'd go to out in Idaho. There was hot springs out there. We'd love to go out there, and it was really something.
Ethel, you've seen a lot of things in your 96 years of living. One thing I'd like to ask you, what's your personal thoughts and feelings on what happened in New York City on 9/11?
Oh, that was terrible. Well, you see, we went through the First World War and the Second World War, and then
Korea,
yes, Korea, and then
Vietnam.
yeah, I had a grandson in there. He was, what was tall man?
He was in 82nd Airborne.
Yeah,
He was like in the Rangers and the LRP teams, and he was armored cav, and then they were on the aero rifle teams
and
during his year over there.
he was. We had a lot of bad nights when we wondered about him. He was injured twice, and both times Ruth was at home alone. Let's see, he was the airborne, and he was in the LRPs and the Rangers, and he used to, when something was down behind the lines, a plane or a tank or something,
Helicopters would go down. That was the aero
Yeah.
rifle teams.
and then he'd
Have to go in and
pick
rescue
up the
him.
crews
Uh,
and
no,
stay with the helicopter
they
until
would
the big one
he
came out to pick it
they'd
up.
drop him
Bring it
off,
back.
and then he'd take parts out that they didn't want anybody to get a hold of, and then he'd hide a day or two so they could come and pick him up again.
Well, Ethel, unless you have any more stories to tell, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society, would like to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us. It's been very enjoyable.
Well, I really have enjoyed living in Cedar Rapids. I can tell you that,
Thank you.
and that's